Before the kids were being groomed and taken advantage of on Discord, we had Kick, which was much, much worse. Kick was a place where people could join fun group chats and be on the receiving end of all manner of unsolicited nudes, creepy adults, and the worst of humanity. This is the story about how a Kick roleplay group ended in an actual home invasion. Fair warning, this is the darkest story I think we've ever covered. Pedophilic grooming, suicidality, and sexual malevolence are all big themes. That said, this is gonna be a rough ride. Roll post. This story hails all the way back from 2016. I am a female and I was 16 at the time this took place, and I was going through some tough spots IRL and as a result was diving into the virtual community to escape from reality. More specifically, I was using Kick. While I was doing this, I met a friend online. For the sake of simplicity, I will just refer to them as friend. So after chatting with friend for a few months, friend asks me if I've ever roleplayed before. At this point in my life, I had not. I mean, I have played JRPGs, but that is kind of different. Friend explained the concept to me and I felt like I wanted to try it. And so friend gave me an invite to a group that they've been a part of for 3 years at that point. They explained the plot as being essentially a communal residence roleplay, where all of our characters were essentially roommates in a giant mansion. So I joined the room, and immediately, as soon as I join, someone we will call Kat immediately says, "Ew, a whore, go fucking hang yourself," as soon as I enter. And then one of her two friends we will call Ice also chimes in saying, "Yeah, go put a gun in your mouth and do us all a favor." Naturally, I was a bit concerned, but friend just says, "Oh, just ignore them. They say that to everyone. It's like a joke or something to them." And so I did just that and ignored them. Or at least I was trying to. Because every time I said anything in the chat, one of the three of them, Kat, Ice, and the last one will be called 10, would post some sort of comment telling me that I'm a whore and that I'm unwanted and that everyone hates me. I decided to message privately the DM, or owner of the group. I will call him King J. So I messaged King J and told him that I was feeling uncomfortable with everything that Kat, Ice, and 10 were saying. However, he basically just waved it off, saying, "Oh, just ignore them, they don't really mean it. And besides, they have been here since I made the group, so I can't remove them. Besides, if you ignore them, they'll get bored and stop eventually." I was a little annoyed, so I would just go back to the roleplay and try to continue on, yet they just would not stop. Now, when I say I was going through a rough patch IRL, I'm referring to having had a traumatic event happen to me that honestly I'm not over yet to this day. Although it happened 3 years ago, I still was suffering from some psychological damage it did. IRL classmates of mine noticed some of these issues and began to bully me relentlessly. They would call me things like whore, slut, and would tell me to commit suicide. So the fact that now I was getting this kind of treatment online as well as in real life was not good for me. Me being mentally unstable after a month of getting this on both ends, I actually tried to end it all, but obviously I was unsuccessful. While I was in recovery, friend was all concerned because I disappeared for a few days. When I told them what I tried to do, they were upset, and they took it to King J. King J initially accused my friend of making up the story about how I was feeling and accused friend of using my account as an alt to fabricate a story. So, as proof, King J asked me to prove that I was a real person. And, well, to be honest, the means of how he wanted this proved was not very comfortable at all. To be honest, I should have refused, but like I said, I was messed up from some past events and I went through with it just to stop his pestering. I guess you can somewhat guess what he wanted, but I'll probably go more in depth about it on a separate post that focuses more on that aspect of this RP group. So after I had verified with King J, he realized just how toxic Kat, Ice, and 10 were. So immediately he removed and banned Kat and only Kat because she was the one who stirred up this toxic behavior in the other two. Which, to my surprise, was actually true, as Ice and 10 became almost like different people entirely. Then, for about 3 months, things were relatively more peaceful. I say relatively because although now you were not being harassed and bullied daily, there was other stuff, like I said earlier. And 10 behaved herself so much that eventually she was even considered trusted enough by King J where he made her an admin. During this time on Kick, there was no difference between an admin and a moderator. In fact, the moderator role didn't exist, so any admin had the power to do anything in the group. Continuing, so it seemed that Kat did not think she'd caused enough drama for the group, she begged King J to unban her, saying she changed and that she's better now. And King J, being incredibly dumb, unbanned her. And so she rejoined the group, and immediately her first words were, and I'm only putting this as a quote of the user, "What's up, you effing N-words? I'm back, bitches!" Now, just to give context, the admin King J is black, so you would expect him to get angry and remove her again. But no, he let it slide. However, my friend got pissed because my friend was also African American, and he did not approve of a 13-year-old white girl, she confirmed it multiple times, using racial slurs like that. And an argument broke out. And because of this argument, King J bans friend from the group. That's right, he banned friend, not Kat. And he said, friend was on thin ice cause they started arguments with Kat before. And I told them if it happened again, I would ban them. To be honest, this made no sense because honestly, he was justified in his anger towards Kat. Later, I would learn that originally the threat to ban them was given to both Friend and Kat, but the only reason why Kat was not banned at that moment was because she was just unbanned and King J didn't want to reban her again, especially since she was, quote, a core founding member of the group, and Friend was not. Anyways, Kat's return didn't last long, because at some point 10 was dumb enough to give Kat admin privileges just cause Kat asked if she could change the group's photo of the campaign. As soon as she got those permissions, she removed all the other admins from the group, including King J, who owned it, and she started banning everyone in the group, saying, "Goodbye, bitches," as she began removing everyone she hated first. Since everyone except for a small group of Kat's friends were banned, King J was forced to make a new, separate group and re-invited everyone. He even invited Kat just so he could immediately ban her. So far, this is actually above average Kick behavior. Not the best, but at least she's talking to kids who are her own age for the most part. For now. As awful as this was, it was only an introduction to the real Hoarder show. And that is about to begin. Roll post. Even though this is where I will end this terrible tale off, for the record, this was in no way the end of Kat. She would, over the next few years, get on Kick and get re-added by King J because she would claim that she's changed. Then she would get rebanned again when it was clear that she didn't. Thankfully, King J was not so reluctant to ban her again after the takeover she pulled off. Also, 10 did not get restored to her mod perms until after Kick modified the role and made it so that only the owner could remove mods. This story partially overlaps with the other one, as I don't remember if I said it or not, but in this house RP there was actually quite a lot of erotic role-playing, and like what was mentioned in the last post, I was 16, Kat, the one who bullied me, was 13, and there were other much younger individuals on this group. The youngest being 10 years of age. And, of course, with one half of the group being super young, you can probably guess the other half of the demographic. If you guessed really old, then you are 100% correct. The oldest user in this group was 75 years old. So basically, this group was full of older pedophiles teaching younger, underage kids how to ERP and how to best describe the sexual acts their characters would be performing. Not only that, but sometimes they would roleplay some pretty dark and heavy stuff, including but not limited to scat, physical abuse, rape, bled she wept, basically cutting and beating your partner till they bleed and cry from pain, cock and ball torture, bestiality, and other things of similar scope. Thankfully, even though some of the members tried to roleplay some of that heavy stuff with me, most of them were 30 or over, I was too uncomfortable with it due to my IRL incident that happened, which thankfully they didn't push too much. They would just find someone else who was willing to do it with them. But to make matters worse, the moderators of this group were pretty bad too. Like when I mentioned in my last story, King J, the owner of the group's verification. What he wanted as proof I was real was a picture of my genitals with a handwritten sign next to them in the picture with my username. And apparently this was common with female users, but male users would be asked for random objects like a brush or a basketball hoop. They claimed this was to make sure people were what they claimed to be, but it's very obvious now that they were using it just to get nudes from a bunch of girls. Most of them were underage. So yes, this was the environment that the group had. A horrible environment where grooming was running rampant like a festering infection that was treated with feces to try and fix it. It was very bad. Now to actually get to the problem player. We'll call him Creep, 52 years old for simplicity's sake. So when I was added to this cesspool of a roleplay campaign, Creep was inactive at the time. This was because apparently Creep went back to college to try and get another degree. When he came back, he was welcomed with open arms essentially by none other than King J himself. However, it did not take long for Creep to catch me in his crosshairs. You see, he was going through all the characters and profiles of the new ones that had been added since he started classes. Of course, I was one of those newbies. Of course, at first what attracted him to me is the fact that my profile listed that I live in Japan and he was a huge weeb apparently. He started his DMs to me, which he'd never asked if he could send me one, which was technically against the rules of the group by asking if I really was from Japan. I said I was, but didn't give an exact location for obvious reasons. At first it wasn't too bad as he was just asking me questions. Most I wasn't really able to answer because they would require me to have been to Tokyo, and at that point of time I would not have visited. But despite me informing him that I have never been to Tokyo, he kept asking me questions about it. Shortly, Creep's questions became weird and personal, like, is age of consent really 13? Are you a virgin? Do you touch yourself? And have you seen a man's dick before? It got uncomfortable for me really quick and I just start shutting down his advances, but this would not stop him. I brought this up with King J, saying how Creep DM'd me without my permission and was asking me creepy and personal stuff. King J, however, just said, "Don't worry about it, you can trust him. He's been a part of the group since the very beginning, a founder of the roleplay. If you ignore him, he'll just eventually get bored." Shortly after this talk, the whole takeover with Cat happened and we moved to a new room. In this new room, there were some different moderators, and Creep was one of them. Soon he would begin DMing me daily, asking me more weird stuff like, have you ever given a blowjob before? Or, how deep is your pussy? And more creepy stuff. So I outright blocked him. Apparently, Creep got butthurt about that and told King J. So King J came into our DMs and then asked me to unblock Creep. I told King J that I did not feel comfortable with Creep's advances to me in DMs, which were all unwanted. King J just brushed it off though, saying, "That's nothing to worry about, he doesn't mean it," and went on to say how I needed to unblock Creep just in case he needs to discuss some moderation business. I didn't take it and I tried to leave the group. And I say try because on Kick you can add people to a group without their permission as long as you know their username. So I left and King J re-added me. Then I left again, and he added me again. This cycle went on and on for a long while until I eventually gave up. "Take a goddamn chill pill," King J told me once I actually stayed around for him to type something. He would then go on to say how he's the owner of the channel and what he says goes. And he says that he needs me to have access to all the moderators, including Creep. At that point, I unblocked Creep just because they would not let it go until I did. So I tried reblocking him again later, but King J was informed of that swiftly and I had to unblock him again. From that moment on, I tried to ignore Creep, and his DMs kept getting creepier when he started saying things like, "You get me so horny," and "I want to fuck you so badly," and even got to the point where he began sending me unsolicited dick pics. Every day before, during, and after his love session with his own hand. Again, I brought it up to King J, who, again, just brushed it off, saying, "You can trust him. He doesn't really mean all that. After all, he has been here since the beginning. I can't remove someone as reliable as him just over rumors." So I took screenshots of the DMs between us, and I sent them to him. King J then just said, "Well, obviously you wanted it, that's why you encourage it." And even though I would protest, saying I never wanted to DM him in the first place, of course, it fell on deaf ears. A week later, I remember there was one weird day where Creep didn't message me at all. And then, the next day, it was also just as quiet. It was kind of peaceful, but I should have known there was something a bit off because of that. Later that day, I heard a knock at the door, and I went and answered. The figure standing there was a tall, stringy man with very grayed hair and some scruff on him like he had not shaven in days. His eyes were somewhat sunken in and his fingers were scrawny and yellowed, like some sort of ghoul that crawled out of the shadows. I was shocked, and the individual spoke up saying, "Hey, it's me, Creep. I decided to come pay you a visit so we can finally be together." Now, mind you, I never gave out my address on the app or internet in general. The most I gave up location-wise was my country of Japan. So he must have accessed my IP somehow through the app. I don't know how he did it, to be honest. As soon as Creep had introduced himself, I immediately screamed and slammed the door, locking it, and Creep began pounding on the door, jiggling the handle, and then throwing himself into the door, trying to open it. Thankfully, at the time, I lived across from a police officer. He happened to be off duty and working on chores at his house. I guess he saw Creep trying to break in and knew that I was home alone at the time. So he immediately ran over and tackled Creep to the ground. And my neighbor managed to pin Creep and handcuff him. In those moments, I was terrified and I was having some flashbacks to the incident I had years ago and the trauma it gave me. But unlike that incident, I was relatively unharmed this time. More terrified than anything. Eventually, the police questioned me if I knew him, and I said he was sending weird messages online and my DM screenshots were printed off and collected as evidence against Creep. One thing I know for sure is over here, when one goes to trial, they're treated guilty until proven innocent. So if he did go to trial, he would most likely have gone to prison. I didn't really keep much track of what happened after that initial incident, as I kind of just wanted to forget about it. But also, I don't know how a foreigner committing a crime would be handled. He most likely did go to jail. Whatever happened, I never heard from Creep again, and I told King J about what happened, and of course, King J denied it, saying, "What? That's obviously made up. Creep has been here since I made the group, and I know he would never do anything like that. Please don't waste my time with false stories like that." I was annoyed, but whatever. The ordeal was over with. Eventually, Creep's account was removed from the group due to inactivity, as he was gone for 6 months after that point and never said anything to King J, as you may guess why. So King J removed him from the room and made his new girlfriend the replacement moderator. Although, to be honest, King J pretty much had a different girlfriend every week, so that did not last long. But considering the environment that developed, one of brazen child grooming and pedophilic sexting, it is not surprising this sort of thing sprouted up. In fact, it's even weirder that it wasn't happening more. However, I did remain in this group for a long while after that. To be honest, I don't know why I didn't leave right away. My only guess is that I was still messed up from my incident, and the people in this group chat had a way of twisting your perception to make you think they were your friends who cared for you. To be completely honest, I myself tried Kick back in its heyday, and I completely believe this story. I don't know a single person who used Kick and did not leave with the impression that it's a nightmare app for serving children to pedos on a silver platter. Like, I just wanted to make some friends and hang out, and I had to deal with no-life McRapeface every single time I joined a group. That said, I have a couple more horror stories in these boxes to my side. Till next time.